I started the divorce because I saw that a spouse who was financially struggling wasn't valuable to me. My world was turned upside down when, on a business trip, my husband suddenly told me he wanted a divorce and that he was already married to his lover. To make things worse, he accused me of marrying him just for his money and demanded that I give up any rights to our property. Facing my indifferent husband, who had always looked down on me since we got married, led to his complete downfall. My name is Lisa. I'm 40 years old. I was raised by a single mother after my father died when I was in kindergarten. Despite the financial hardships, we found happiness as a family of 3. Even now, with a decent job and salary, I still live frugally because of my upbringing. I married Larry, a wealthy man I met through a friend. I was drawn to his kindness and the new possibilities he introduced to me. After we got married, our different views on money and gender roles became clear. Larry imagined a traditional home where I would stay at home, but I was committed to my career and staying financially independent. Before we married, Larry suggested I become a housewife, assuming I would accept traditional roles. However, I made it clear I wanted to keep working until we had kids, pointing out the financial advantages. I managed to convince him, but the reality of balancing work and home responsibilities was hard. Even though I worked full-time, I still had to do all the house chores, leaving us little time together. Meanwhile, Larry, sticking to a traditional husband's role, did nothing at home. He just enjoyed his dinner and relaxed when he got home. Trying to balance work and home life strained our relationship and made me wonder if this was really what marriage was supposed to be like. I was afraid to tell Larry how unhappy I was because I thought he might make me quit my job, even though he didn't help at home. I hoped that having children might improve our relationship, but we were becoming more distant, making me doubt we could start a family. Feeling it was urgent to talk about this, I approached Larry. "Hey, we should think about having kids, right?" I said. "Kids? You're pretty energetic for someone tired from work and chores," he replied. "It's not about that. I want to have children. We haven't been married long, but I'm already over 32. Women can only have children for a certain time, and it's getting harder for me to conceive as I get older. It's almost too late. But we don't need kids. If we have one, you'll expect me to help, right? You know I'm busy with work and won't help with raising children. Isn't it strange to say you won't help with child rearing even before they're born? I plan to raise them alone, but shouldn't you at least want to help? It's your child too. Child rearing is your job. I'm working to support the family, so I definitely won't help with the kids. You'll just complain that I don't help, making me the bad guy. You must have been taught to be poor and have lots of kids since you were born. We're not poor. We don't need kids. End of discussion. Larry abruptly ended the conversation and went to his room. Alone in the living room, I broke down in tears. My desire for children was not only rejected, but he also mocked my upbringing. After this, our relationship got worse quickly. We barely talked, and the hope of having children faded as I continued to balance work and home duties. Taking on significant projects at work, I found myself growing more distant from Larry. One day, as I told him about an upcoming business trip, his unexpected kindness caught me off guard. He wished me well and hinted at a big surprise when I returned. Despite having given up on him, his smile made me hope. But my hope was crushed when I came back. The front door wouldn't open. Larry had changed the locks. His first surprise was announcing our divorce. He claimed to have faked my signature and filed the papers with a friend as a witness. Inside, he handed me a document to sign, giving up my rights to any property division and protesting the false accusations. I insisted that we both give up our rights to any property, and I wanted this to be a public agreement. Larry stubbornly argued and revised the document on his computer, leading to a tense argument as I left the house. He kept mocking me for being poor and even thought about throwing out my things. A few days later, Larry called me in a panic. What did you do? He asked. I haven't done anything. Why are you panicking? I have many questions. First, I was told to leave the apartment. Oh, you were still living there. That's not allowed. It's a new month. You're trespassing. Trespassing? But it's my house. Are you okay? Did you forget it was a company apartment I rented? I was the leaseholder, so naturally, you can't live there anymore. That's ridiculous. How could you do this? I can't believe you didn't know. I'm not the one who should be accused here. Didn't I tell you that you can't just change the locks of a rental apartment? It's my house. I can change the locks if I want. Didn't you listen? It was my lease. And even if you were the leaseholder, the owner is the apartment manager. You can't change the locks without telling them. Is that so? Also, I ended the lease while you changed the locks. I was allowed to live there until this month. I was planning to return, but now you've unlawfully altered someone else's property, which could be criminal damage. Wait, why did you end it so early? Criminal damage? Is that why the police are at the front door now? I'm too scared to open it. Don't worry, it's probably not for trespassing or criminal damage. It's better to talk to them. Why do I know about the police? Because I reported you for filing the divorce papers yourself. It looks like you've committed crimes like forgery and fraudulent use of a document. Divorce papers can be filed by one person, but only with mutual agreement and personal signatures. Since you forged my signature and the witness, it's clearly a crime. Larry seemed unaware of his guilt. So, the divorce papers you submitted are invalid, and your marriage with Laura can't happen either. How do you know about Laura? Did you think I knew nothing? I hired a private detective agency to investigate your affair with Laura. It was a busy time at work, and coordinating with the agency was tough. Plus, you even held a grand wedding ceremony. While I was supposedly on a business trip, I actually took time off work to do some research and prepare documents because I knew about Larry bringing Laura home. It would have been impossible to gather this evidence while working. After I told Larry everything, he was speechless and seemed quite upset, even over the phone. Then he pleaded with me, "Please don't tell Laura I'm divorced." Why would I? There's no such fact to tell. Really, thank you. Are you misunderstanding something? When did you become divorced? That fake divorce paper is invalid, remember? So legally, you're still my husband, not divorced. What? So since you cheated while still legally my husband, Laura needs to pay compensation. I sent the demand for compensation to her house yesterday by express delivery. She didn't know you were married, right? Then I can't withdraw the claim at this point. I knew Laura believed Larry was single, but I deliberately sent the compensation demand. Laura hasn't contacted me yet, so maybe she hasn't received the letter. It should arrive soon. Should you be on the phone with me when you also have to deal with the police? You're busy. I'll ignore the police. I won't be arrested. I'm going to Laura's house now to get the letter back before she or her family can accept it. He then hung up and probably went straight to Laura's house to wait for the postman at the front door. I knew it would be futile because the letter was sent as registered mail to Laura only. Even if he waited for the postman, he couldn't receive it. A few hours later, a disheartened Larry called me. According to him, there was an incident when the postman arrived. Finally, I'll take that envelope. Who are you? You don't live here, right? I'm practically a resident here since I'm married. I have the right to receive the mail. I see, but I can't give you this envelope. It's registered mail for Laura only. What? Give it to me? Absolutely not. If you're so eager, ask Laura for permission. What's going on here? Oh, Larry, what's all this noise? Laura, this is registered mail for you. This man insisted on taking it. Sorry for the disturbance. What's this? A demand for compensation? Larry, you were married? What's going on here? Sorry, it's just, she's an ex-wife from a long time ago. I was embarrassed to say I'm divorced. I'm sorry for keeping it a secret, but isn't it strange? We haven't been dating long, and suddenly there's a demand for compensation. If you were divorced before we started dating, there shouldn't be any problem, right? Well, my ex-wife is crazy. Maybe she's demanding compensation out of spite because I got married. That was the excuse he gave, but his lie was soon exposed. The envelope included a letter I wrote along with my contact information, so Laura called me directly. During that call, I told her about the affair, the invalid divorce, and that they had a wedding ceremony while he was still married to me. Although they had a wedding ceremony, they hadn't submitted the marriage registration yet. Larry wanted to submit it on April Fool's Day, so it was still pending. He probably delayed submitting the marriage registration because he was unsure whether the divorce was finalized. After being exposed, Larry left Laura's house and shamelessly contacted me again. I still had something to tell him, so we agreed to meet at a nearby cafe. As soon as I arrived, Larry said, "Lisa, please withdraw the compensation claim. Let's pretend we've been separated for a long time and officially divorced now. I can apologize to Laura for being secretly divorced and maybe cover it up. Do you think I'm desperate to stay married to you? I was going to file for divorce anyway, but since you cheated, you'll pay compensation." Just trying to extort money from me, huh? Typical of the poor. You have such a poor heart, he said. You're talking nonsense. Depending on my answer, everything can change. There's still an option where we don't divorce if I say no. You can't reject it, meaning you can't marry Laura and your marital status will be exposed. Fine, I'll pay the compensation. Just divorce me now. Sign here. Then, about property division. Property division? How much more do you want to take from me? Compensation should be enough. Remember we agreed to waive property division, right? So let's make it official. All right, you're not as bad as I thought. Thank you. We then went to a public notary, made a public document for compensation and property division, and then to the city hall to submit the divorce papers, finalizing our divorce. Relieved, I exchanged final words with Larry. Glad we don't have to divide property. What are you saying? I'm the one who benefits from that. By the way, do you even have assets after paying me compensation? Laura will also claim damages. She mentioned charging you for the wedding expenses. That's impossible. I'm marrying Laura. She can't claim that we're divorced now, so there should be no problem. Still living in a fantasy, huh? You committed marriage fraud. You had a wedding while still married. Do you think Laura still believes you? Marriage fraud. That's ridiculous. Laura will believe me. Believe that if you want. I heard from Laura directly. Also, weren't the guests at your wedding paid actors? You still owe them, you know. You know about that? I haven't paid them yet. What does it matter to you? You could have just taken property division and been better off. That's what I wanted to tell you. Even if we had divided property, you would have benefited more. What are you talking about, poor woman? Your family is poor and you only make $230,000 a year, right? Even if you got a raise, it would be barely $30,000. You don't have any property. You keep calling me poor, so I thought you might be mistaken. Yes, my salary is indeed $145,000, but you know I work for a foreign company, right? It seems you have no interest in me, but I became a director of the American branch. It's not $145,000 per year, but per month. $170,000 per month, so that's an annual income of $2.5 million. You're still bad with numbers. How do you manage to keep a job? It's $2.5 million a year. $2.5 million? That can't be true. Of course, I haven't had the chance to spend such an amount, so I've been saving it for the future. The savings from before our marriage aren't part of the property division, but there's still a considerable amount since our marriage. So I could have received half of that in the property division. You were my wife after all. I'll get the divorce papers corrected. Are you okay? After all the contempt, you think I'd gladly undo the divorce if you have that much money? You don't need to claim compensation, right? It's just a small amount for you. He who laughs at 1 cent will weep for 1 cent. This compensation is for the mental anguish you caused me. I'd like to claim more, honestly. And since we've made it official, make sure to pay it, even in installments. I'll be penniless. Also, don't go back to that apartment. Your belongings should have been moved to your parents' house by now. You thought I had few belongings, but that was because I had already moved most of them. Were you that indifferent to me? I can have so little, so I have to go back to my parents' house. They don't know anything yet, do they? Let me explain. Don't say anything. I already told them everything. It's only fair to explain why we're divorcing. Oh, and your father said never to step over our threshold again, so I have nowhere to go. He collapsed and I left the cafe. Later, I heard he caused trouble at the police station. Despite my advice, he went back to the apartment. He just sat there aimlessly in the empty apartment until the manager called the police, and he was taken away. I'm not sure if it was for obstructing public duties, trespassing, or the falsified divorce papers. Eventually, his parents took responsibility for him. After talking with me and learning about Laura, they decided that apologizing and paying damages to Laura's family came first. They went to Laura's house to apologize, kneeling in front of her family. They settled everything without pressing charges for marriage fraud, even paying for the wedding expenses. I had expected them to sue, so it was disappointing they didn't. I decided to pursue legal action against him for forging the divorce papers. Larry offered a settlement, but I didn't withdraw the lawsuit. I didn't want him to think everything could be solved with money. I wanted him to be convicted and understand the gravity of his actions, even if it cost time and money. I left everything to my lawyer, so it wasn't too burdensome for me. Even though it took time, Larry, exposed for his actions and the marriage fraud, couldn't stay at his company anymore. After being detained by the police and subsequently absent without leave, he was eventually fired. He ended up living at his parents' home, working all day at a relative's construction company. His father took all his earnings, leaving him with no income. I thought his parents wouldn't abandon him, but they were stricter than I expected. They paid my compensation and Laura's compensation, planning to make him work hard until he repaid everything. He lived in a shed-like place with no electricity, receiving only $10 per day for food, deducted from his salary. They planned to kick him out once he'd repaid everything, a harsh fate. After years of hard work, I was offered a position at the head office abroad, so I moved overseas after the divorce was finalized. I worried that Larry might come to me for help or harbor resentment, but moving abroad alleviated those concerns. Initially, I thought work would be my sole companion for a while, but life took an unexpected turn. I soon found myself in a new relationship. I am now dating a foreign executive at our head office. Things have progressed quickly and I'm pregnant with plans to marry soon. I shared everything about my past and my ex-husband with him, and he's been incredibly understanding and supportive. We've discussed our future together in depth. I'll be taking maternity leave soon, and we've planned for me to return to work afterward. He's enthusiastic about taking paternity leave and embracing the role of an active co-parent, which showcases a refreshing cultural perspective compared to what I experienced previously. My past experiences with my ex-husband were challenging, but now I finally feel like I'm on the path to true happiness. I am gaining confidence each day and moving closer to building the happy family I've always dreamed of. The journey here taught me a lot about resilience and the complexity of relationships. Many people endure suffering due to selfish partners, and while divorce isn't always the preferred solution, enduring in silence is certainly not a virtue. It's crucial to recognize that open and honest discussions can pave the way to meaningful resolutions. In some cases, divorce turns out to be a necessary decision for personal growth and well-being. This chapter of my life has reinforced that belief, helping me move forward with a new sense of purpose and hope for the future. I don't think marriage should be about money, but some people really care about wealth more than anything else. My sister-in-law, Laura, is one of those people. I never thought greed would become such a big issue over an inheritance after my brother, a well-respected surgeon, died. I'm Julia Roberts. I manage a jewelry store, and I'm happy being single at 35. However, I've been thinking about marriage since my boyfriend recently proposed. Our families are getting together tomorrow to celebrate our engagement, but I can feel tension brewing. My older brother Kyle, who is a well-known surgeon in Paris, has always looked out for me and taught me a lot because he's much older. He jokes about checking out my boyfriend as if he were my dad, which makes me laugh. But I can tell he's a bit worried. Kyle's marriage to Laura, a very beautiful woman with questionable morals, really shows the conflict between looks and true character. Despite their glamorous life, Laura's love for luxury puts a strain on our family relationships. Her need for expensive things often comes before her promises, leaving us let down and upset. At first, we overlooked Laura's behavior, thinking it was because of the pressure to look good. But as she started skipping more family events, our patience started to wear thin. Her decision to cancel on tomorrow's gathering at the last minute for tea at a fancy hotel is a perfect example of her selfishness. While we wouldn't mind her not being there, it's her lack of thought for others that really bothers me. I'm tired of always bending over backward to accommodate her every whim. I tried to talk to my brother about it, but his weakness for Laura stops any serious conversation. He just apologized for the inconvenience and tried to reassure me. He promised he would talk to her about her actions. I'll be there tomorrow, he assured me, convincing me to drop the issue for now. What bothers me the most isn't just Laura's selfishness, but also how she gets my busy brother to say sorry for her and do her tasks, even though she doesn't work and could handle them herself. Despite being at home full-time, Laura doesn't do housework. She hires cleaners and prefers to eat out. Her days are filled with shopping for brand-name items, leaving little time for real responsibilities. The next day, our family meeting went well, and my boyfriend won everyone over. It was a nice gathering, although it didn't last long. That evening, just as I was relaxing, Laura called out of the blue and started yelling. She demanded scones and macarons and scolded me for neglecting her. Confused, I tried to talk to her calmly, but she kept shouting. Despite my efforts to explain, Laura kept demanding, paying no attention to reason. She even demanded a souvenir from the hotel and had so many other unreasonable expectations that left me both puzzled and tired. What should have been a happy evening ended with me feeling exhausted and annoyed because of Laura's unreasonable demands and outbursts. I wondered how Kyle managed to find peace in his daily life with Laura's constant mood swings. What made him marry her in the first place? While her beauty was obvious, her self-centered nature was off-putting. I thought maybe she was spoiled because of her looks. I was worried for Kyle, but I knew I shouldn't interfere with his marriage. It was his choice, after all, and he had always respected my choices too. The next day at the jewelry store where I work, I saw Laura outside, walking arm in arm with a man around her age, probably in his late 30s. They were chatting comfortably as they came into the store. I paused before going over to them. Laura acted like nothing was wrong when she saw me, which made me even more uncomfortable. When I asked about the man with her, Laura said he was just an old friend from her modeling days. Still, seeing them together, especially since she's married, made me feel uneasy. As Laura looked at the jewelry, she boldly asked if she could get an employee discount, seemingly unaware that this was inappropriate. I calmly told her we don't offer such discounts. Honestly, I didn't like the idea of her friend buying things for her, and she seemed slightly annoyed when I told her the discount wasn't available. Laura picked out some items and left, leaving the man to pay the bill. This made me wonder about their relationship. That evening, I decided to talk to Kyle about what I saw. But when I called him, he seemed really down. "Kyle, what's wrong?" I asked, noticing he was upset. I had my suspicions about Laura, but I didn't mention them. When I tried to talk about my upcoming wedding, Kyle seemed distracted by his own thoughts. He talked about saving for our wedding next year and invited me over, but didn't say much about Laura. His uncertainty made me curious. Although I tried to discuss the wedding details, Kyle was non-committal and ended the call abruptly, asking me to meet at our parents' house without explaining why. Maybe he wasn't feeling well. Kyle, a dedicated surgeon, often puts other people's needs before his own health, and this tendency of his to ignore his own health worries me, despite his jokes about the risks of his job. I couldn't stop thinking that his non-stop work schedule was wearing him down. I doubted that Laura, with her self-centered attitude, could give him the support he needed. Kyle sent an email later outlining the plan for a gathering at our parents' house. When I got there, I was shocked to see how pale and worn out he looked, worse than ever before. I asked him how he was, but he just gave me vague answers about being busy with work. Finally, I gathered the courage to talk about Laura's recent actions. I told him about her visit to my store with a young man and wondered aloud if she was deceiving him again. Laura's past actions had always worried me, and I couldn't overlook them any longer. "I've been too busy with work to pay much attention to her," my brother confessed. Our parents were upset by her absence at the gathering, which gave me a chance to bring up my concerns. When I asked Kyle about Laura's absence, he said solemnly, "Laura isn't here today, which is why I asked you all to come. I have a favor to ask." With a serious look, Kyle shared some shocking news. Despite our shock, he stood firm, leaving us stunned. 5 months later, tragedy struck as my brother died from stomach cancer, a result of constant stress and overwork. It was a harsh truth to face. Despite his commitment to saving others, he had neglected his own health. He had started to see signs and went through tough tests that confirmed his illness. We wished he had told us sooner. Tears flowed at his funeral, surrounded by a deep feeling of loss. I remembered all the ways Kyle had supported me during my early challenges. His death before he even turned 20 left us overwhelmed with grief. Yet during our mourning, Laura's actions were glaringly obvious. She wore a flashy necklace to the funeral, a gift from another man, showing no respect for the solemn occasion. Her insensitive behavior was unbearable. Overcome with anger, I confronted her. "Why are you wearing that?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Don't you realize how much my brother cared for you?" Laura just smiled, seemingly untouched by the seriousness of the situation. "I know," she replied carelessly. "It's just how the world works. If you're so unhappy, why did you marry me?" Her harsh words really hurt, and I had to hold back my anger in front of my brother, our parents, and the others. It was clear that Laura didn't care about my brother's memory at all. Her selfish behavior and her careless talk about their marriage and waiting for her inheritance made me furious. Before I knew it, I almost slapped her, but a man by her side caught my hand. He then introduced himself as a nurse who had worked with Kyle and was here to look after me at Kyle's request. I was confused and trying to understand everything going on. Despite the sadness of the funeral, hearing the laughter of the nurses and doctors, who were Kyle's colleagues, brought me a moment of comfort amidst the chaos. I turned to the nurse who had stopped me during the laughter for some clarity. His reply was straightforward. "Did the doctor leave any inheritance behind? Your family should know." His words hit home. I knew very well that my brother hadn't left any inheritance. But Laura, not knowing this, became hysterical. She started accusing us of plotting against her to take the money for ourselves. She was sure she would soon get a large sum of money. As Laura's accusations grew louder, the nurse's amusement turned into full laughter. Seeing things getting out of hand, my dad stepped in, calm but assertive. "Do you really not know?" he asked her. Eager for answers, Laura demanded to know what was going on. I obliged, sharing the details of my brother's financial arrangements during his lifetime. He had set aside €20 million specifically for my wedding and had other generous gifts planned as well. As this reality dawned on Laura, her expression changed dramatically from shock to pale disbelief. My brother, although highly respected for his medical expertise, was known for his lavish spending habits. He indulged in extravagant parties, exclusive dinners, and luxurious accommodations as a way to relieve the stress from his demanding career and family responsibilities. Despite his intent to share these joys with Laura, she was notably absent during both his challenging and celebratory moments. It was not Laura who stood by him during tough times. Instead, it was his colleagues and friends, the very people who were now gathered to pay their respects, who supported him. The nurses, whose laughter had earlier filled the room, began to share poignant memories of my brother's acts of kindness and generosity. They recounted how, despite his hectic schedule, he always made time to look after them, hosting gatherings that left a lasting impression. Their stories deepened their admiration for him, inspiring them to strive harder in their own careers. As they spoke, they revealed another significant act of kindness from my brother: the donation of the remainder of his estate to the hospital. Representatives from the hospital were present and expressed their gratitude for his contribution, which would help alleviate their annual struggles with research funding and improve future medical care. Witnessing the extent of my brother's compassion towards others, I couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment towards Laura. While he had impacted so many lives in such positive ways, Laura, who should have been his closest companion, displayed nothing but selfishness and greed. Months later, Laura contacted me, her tone as demanding as ever, eager to secure what she believed was her rightful inheritance. However, her careless management of the estate affairs revealed a shocking truth. Despite my brother's considerable earnings, his assets were nearly depleted. In her pursuit of the mansion and other properties, Laura had overlooked the fact that Kyle had accumulated significant debts. This oversight left her with only a fraction of what she had anticipated. Her pleas for help were met with no sympathy, as her earlier behavior had alienated those who might have otherwise been inclined to assist her. I made it clear to Laura that with Kyle's passing, the family ties that loosely bound us had effectively dissolved. Her behavior throughout had spoken louder than any words could, revealing her true motives despite her claims of affection for my brother. "I could potentially help you out of this trouble," I told her, "but how can you expect that after you've been so blatantly selfish?" My voice was tinged with disbelief and disappointment as I spoke. Laura's response was fraught with impatience, a stark contrast to the composed facade she usually maintained. She was grappling with the new and harsh reality of inheriting not only the mansion, but also the substantial debts that came with it. I reminded her, somewhat coldly, that inheriting meant taking responsibility for both assets and liabilities. I even pointed out that she had the option to renounce the inheritance within 5 months of being informed. The suggestion that she might sell the luxury items she had amassed over the years to cover the debts only elicited a flood of tears and desperate pleas for forgiveness. Despite her remorse, or perhaps because of the insincerity I felt underlined it, I found myself unable to offer any consolation. The conversation ended with a heavy heart on my part, as I was unable to reconcile her past actions with the cherished memory of my brother. Following Kyle's death, the plans for my wedding had to be postponed by a year. During this challenging period, the cloud of depression lingered over me, a stark reminder of the loss and betrayal I had experienced. Recognizing my distress, my husband and his family extended their heartfelt understanding and support. Their compassion was a beacon of light during a time darkened by loss and disappointment. Determined not to let the memory of my late brother down, I vowed to live a life of gratitude, channeling my energies into supporting and acknowledging those who had stood by me through thick and thin. When the wedding finally took place, it was not just a celebration of union, but also a tribute to Kyle's lasting impact on those around him. His popularity and the respect he commanded among his colleagues became poignantly evident as many of them visited his grave to pay their respects. They shared stories of his generosity and kindness, especially towards his coworkers, further cementing his legacy as a man who had genuinely cared for others beyond the confines of family and personal gain. Through these reflections and tributes, the wedding became a dual ceremony of love and remembrance, intertwining my new beginning with the honoring of a life that, while tragically cut short, had profoundly touched many. This convergence of joy and sorrow underscored the complexities of life and the enduring influence of genuine connections forged in both joyous and challenging times. I was always concerned that my brother's generosity might make him vulnerable to those looking to exploit his kind nature. However, the overwhelming support from friends and colleagues after his passing reassured me that his goodwill had been genuinely appreciated, not taken advantage of. Meanwhile, news about Laura's decline began to circulate within the jewelry industry and among our social circles. Known for her lavish lifestyle and a series of questionable relationships, she painted as stark contrast to my brother's legacy of generosity and integrity. Laura, who had once lived in luxury, was now forced to sell her opulent mansion due to her unsustainable spending habits and the mountain of debt she had accumulated over the years. Now, she found herself living in modest accommodations, a far cry from the grandeur she was accustomed to. Her financial downfall was a topic of quiet discussion and served as a cautionary tale about the perils of living beyond one's means. Reflecting on Laura's misfortunes, I couldn't help but feel vindicated in my long-held belief that marrying for money was a fundamentally flawed motivation. It was clear that Laura's priorities had led her to a lonely and challenging path, whereas my brother's focus on kindness and giving had earned him lasting respect and love from those around him. Motivated by these reflections, I vowed more fervently to honor my brother's memory by protecting his legacy. He had spent his life not only as a skilled surgeon, but as a pillar of support and generosity in our community. In his professional life, he was revered not just for his medical expertise, but for his willingness to go beyond the call of duty to assist his colleagues and patients alike. At home, he had always been my protector, guiding and supporting me through life's challenges. Determined to keep his spirit alive, I engaged more actively in community service and charity work, areas my brother was passionate about. I organized fundraisers and volunteered at the hospital where he had worked, helping to fund the programs he had started or supported. These efforts brought me a sense of closeness to him, a feeling that I was continuing his work in some way. Moreover, I took steps to ensure that the stories of his kindness and generosity were remembered and celebrated. I shared these stories at community gatherings and on social media, ensuring that his legacy would inspire others as much as it inspired me. The positive responses from people who had been touched by my brother's life encouraged me to keep sharing and celebrating his life. In doing so, I found a profound sense of purpose. While Laura's life seemed to spiral into chaos as a result of her choices, I found strength and fulfillment in upholding the values my brother had taught me. This contrast between our paths was a stark reminder of the different outcomes that result from our life choices. By choosing to embody my brother's principles of generosity and support, I not only honored his memory, but also enriched my own life, making it fuller and more meaningful. Through these actions, I not only kept my brother's memory alive, but also ensured that his legacy of kindness and selflessness continued to impact the community, proving that the values he lived by were his true lasting wealth.